Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of June 10th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Franciac, you take the roll, please.
Mr. Fantini.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Walters. Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
I'd like to excuse Mr. Walters.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Cleveland McGrath, a second by Mr. Fantini to excuse Mr. Walters. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're on to announcements and committee reports. As usual, I have a few announcements. I'd like to thank a number of hosts for last week. 4 ribbon cuttings. Three were of businesses expanding or coming to town. So RV Park at CAP saw a number of council members there, so that was great. First Command Financial and Wellness for Life expanding. Also, thanks to the Daughters of the American Revolution for a wonderful tribute for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and I think I saw Mr. Fantini there. Coming up, just a reminder, members of the public can still participate in the city's 2025 budget development process by one way of participating by participating in online surveys. Survey will remain open at least through August and probably throughout the budget process. Anacortes reminder, Anacortes High School Senior Parade is tomorrow at 4 p.m. So expect some street closures and some happy folks. Also, graduation is 6 p.m. Wednesday, the 12th of June. So also be aware of that. And I forgot to thank also Cap Sandy graduation was last week, and I had the privilege of attending that matriculation. So congratulations to those graduates. There will be a joint council commissioners meeting Tuesday. That's tomorrow, the 11th, 5 p.m. at McIntyre Hall. That's for city council members and commissioners. Bark in the Park, Saturday the 15th at Storvik Park, 10 a.m. from 1 p.m. New this year, community dog walk at 9:30. And then, of course, the rest is enjoy dog contests, canine demonstrations, and games and fun for everyone. Also, Skagit County will issue a burn ban come June 15th, so that's coming up Saturday. So burn ban applies to all residential and land clearing fires in unincorporated Skagit County. No new burn permits will be granted. Existing permits will be suspended until further notice. Recreation and cooking fires are still allowed. There is a burn ban already in the entire city limits of Anacortes, with the exception of recreational fires, which you need to get a burn permit for. You can do those online. It's really easy to do. They're free, and that's every year. If you got any questions, you can call the fire department, 293-1925. Reminder of Father's Day is Sunday, June 16th. And Washington State Ferries will be hosting public meetings on Monday, the 17th of June, and that's at noon, so we won't meet council before then. So just wanted to put that out, and you can find a link to that. You must register for those meetings both Monday at noon on the 17th and Tuesday 6 p.m. on the 18th. That's Washington State Ferries public meetings, and there's links on our city website. So that's it for me, and first up is Planning Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
The Planning Committee met at 5 p.m. today. Ms. Cleveland McGrath and I, along with Planning Director John Coleman and Senior Planner Libby Grage, and we talked about a low-income housing set of apartments here in town where there have been some landlord-tenant issues. This is not a housing authority project. It is not a family center project. But what to do in cases where tenants are having a hard time with their landlords, and so the best thing for people to do is to contact Skagit Legal Aid, because they can help offer resources, particularly for people who are of lower income and don't have as many financial resources as others might. We talked about the Guimas Channel Trail and progress on that. We do have $400,000 in our budget for an environmental impact study for the whole trail. So that will help determine what we need to do this trail right. And we talked about different sections along the water and property owners and bank heights, steepnesses, things like that. Just kind of a check-in conversation. We spent a lot of time talking about the comp plan and how much time it requires of planning department staff. And we're currently down an associate planner and talking about how we can best get that work done. Does it mean hiring another person? We also talked about the council requests for our engagement along the way and how much public participation is, how much time that requires from the consultant and from staff. And so at our council retreat on Thursday, we'll talk about how we can do that as a process that council can help defray potential costs of hiring another person by doing our own homework, by watching planning commission meetings, by coming prepared instead of having to have staff or consultants do similar work more than one time. So how we can best streamline the process so we can do it very well and more economically. Because there's just a lot going on in this comp plan with the climate element and housing and income bands and all the things that we've been talking about. There's just really more to this comp plan than just an update with all the new GMA requirements. So it's a lot, but we're up for it. We talked about also process optimization in the planning department and between departments to speed up permit processes, and staff's looking into how to do that for more efficiency. And then we will hear tonight about the land capacity analysis and in more detail from Mr. Coleman. And any of you who had attended or watched the planning commission meeting, you'll get a preview, but he'll go over it for us here too, for us and the people at home. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Port City Liaison Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
We had a Port City Liaison Committee meeting on June 4th, and Mayor Miller was there, Councilmember Fantini was there, a number of Port and City staff were also there, and Port commissioners. It was actually a shorter meeting. We did pretty much just a kind of quick reporting rundown of various projects on each side. We talked a little bit about hoping July 1st. We have 2 units at Station 1. I know that that's Mayor Miller's goal and all of our goals to get that second unit up at the fire department. A little bit about Ship Harbor and working with the port and the city together. There was some major damage due to a king tide. We are working together with a consultant, and the goal is 15% design. And then it'll come to both the commissioners at the port and council members here. It was not a declared FEMA event, so there is not FEMA money to be had on this project, just as a point of interest. Talked a little bit about the outfall. I think the major work's going to start about July 1st, so that everyone's in good communication there with the contractor. 12th and commercial, we talked a bit about getting to that 30% design, and hopefully we will have a presentation from Public Works in the near future. A little about Event Center. We'd had our last meeting. Our next meeting with the architects will be, I believe, the last Monday in June, where we hopefully will have a little bit firmer numbers and a little bit clearer direction of what it's going to entail. And at which point we'll have to start discussing our next phase and our next interlocal agreement between the 2 entities to move forward. Then we talked a little bit about the 9th Street vacation that the port is applying for. It will be on our June 17th council meeting. And then finally, the port talked a bit about some of their grant work they've been doing. They've done a lot to try to, for applications. One is $9.5 million application for TDOC, and it's a PIDP grant. The other one that's most exciting that I think we've talked about mentioned in the past is EPA has a ridiculous amount of money available right now. And so we've had our port of Anacortes, along with a number of partners, including but not limited to Culbertson, Stabbert Marine, Skyline Marina, Island Express, and Washington State Department of Traffic for the ferries, to put in a request for $72 million as a joint effort around Fidago Island. So we're hoping that will be looked on positively. And then I think we talked a little bit about just the TDOC, some of the permitting next steps. That was it.
Thank you. Any other council or committee reports?
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Fantini.
I just wanted to let, I just wanted to let everyone know that on Tuesday, June 25th, I'm going to be doing a Ward 3 town hall from 6 to 8 p.m. at the library community room, where, of course, all Ward 3 residents are welcome to come. Actually, any residents of the city are more than welcome to join and come through to talk about any questions they might have. I'll see if I can do my best to address all those questions. And yeah, so that'll be on June 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the library community room.
Okay, any other announcements or committee reports? Okay, we'll move on to item 4, which is public comment, and you should have all received in your packet public comment from William Turner. So that was a written public comment, and I've got a few folks signed up for public comment, so I'll go for the sign up first. So Juan Mu, I've got you up first. Anacortes affordable housing is the topic. So again, this is an opportunity for any member of the public that wants to address the council on anything that's not on our agenda. We've got a couple items for public comment, and I'll wait till then. But we won't start the clock until you start talking. And make sure your microphone's on.
Okay,
There we go.
yeah,
Name and city, please.
Xuan Mu, Anacortes. From Mr. Turner's comment this evening, we can see the affordable housing project since 2016 comprehensive development plan. Many goals from his view, they have not been met. So it is prudent that we should review the goals back in 2016, see what should be improved before we are so passionate about multifamily housing projects, such as the presentation we saw in the senior center a few weeks ago, as well as cottages that's popping up here and there in town. We've seen 32nd and D Avenue, 6 units. We've also seen at the 37th and Commercial about 6-7 units, as well as 35th and Pinton. Talk to the residents there and see the issues. And I think it's important we do that. So as for the housing, what's really driving the prices up? Because of the time limits, I will just go into the conclusions. Look at the upper left charts. That's a record low interest rate. So in reality, virtually 0% before interest took off the end of 2022. And then looking at the bottom, uncontrollable government spending. And after pandemic was over in 2023, the expenditure didn't go down. in 2024. And looking at our money supply, today, currency in circulation is 2.2 trillion versus 1.6 to 1.7 trillion pre-pandemic. So that balloons up, massive amount of money chasing the same amount of goods and services. You are going to see 50% inflation rate. And what other factors, looking at the upper level, the red, 26% investors were talking about companies buying and selling tens and thousands of homes. They are in the market purely looking at return on per invested dollar. And then we look, that's from 2000 to 2024, quarter one from Redfin. And all this data are from public domain. And then looking at Center for Immigration Status, we're also record level as immigration into this country. And two parts, legal immigrants, they come with money, they enter the housing market. And also the people from the South, they enter the workforce, that suppressed US workers' wages. And also the record level of compensation inequality. Look at a private company in this area. Everybody knows that's the CEO compensation from 2014 to 2023, as well as medium housing.
Okay, if you got to wrap it up, and be sure to address, we're here to address the council, not the audience.
So this is from 20, I will wrap it up. This is looking at
15 seconds.
Okay, really what's causing the affordability issue is after the pandemic. It's more than 100% increase. And then from 2014 to 2019, the state and the local governments have revised the law to build denser cluster of homes and mixed types. And meanwhile, none of the underlying issues were addressed. Okay. So I don't think that would have solved the issue.
Okay, thank you. And you can certainly submit these items to the council. Thank you. All right, next up I have Joe Coomer, earthquakes, forest fires, and I think it's runways. And again, make sure the microphone's on, and please state your name and the city you live in.
You can hear me okay now?
Can hear you.
I'm talking.
Start with your name and the city.
Okay, my name is Joseph Coomer. I live in Oak Harbor, Washington, and I'm here looking for endorsements. And I realize that earthquakes are not much of a concern here, but they are worldwide. And basically what I'm proposing is a total new idea. Suspension. When you suspend a structure, it is not connected to the earth. It is therefore impossible for the earthquake to force a suspended item to move. Try to understand that research in the past has focused on making structures strong enough. This has nothing to do with strength of the thing. And making them strong enough, about the best they can do is a magnitude 6. If you suspend the structure, it does not move. And therefore, there are no dynamic loads generated. And a suspended structure is good for magnitude 10. 10 is 40 times stronger than a magnitude 6. And the thing of it is, I've tried and tried and tried. In the last 2 years, I have sent 13 letters to FEMA. No response. I have sent letters to EERI and PEER and so forth. No response. I've sent letters to the researchers at think tanks like University of Texas and so forth, and no response. I've even mailed to the president of the 8 universities to look into this. No response. So this is why I'm trying to beg you is to look at my work. And if you can't prove me wrong, then accept what I've written is true. And I would hope that you can give me a signature on that, because we have to look at this stuff, because you're representing 28,000 people here in Anacortes, but you also represent humanity. And that's very important, because like in the earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria, there were 50,000 people died in Turkey, and another 8,000 people died in Syria. This is very serious. And look at my vision. If you suspend all the structures in an area, and it has hit by a major earthquake, there's few casualties, hardly any property damage, and no fatalities. This is huge, folks. And I'm looking for your signatures on this. And if you can't, you got to look at this stuff and understand that I can't get published without endorsements. And that's what I'm telling you.
Okay.
You know.
Thank you, Mr. Coomer. Your time is up. Your time is up, sir.
Oh, I had the other stuff too, but
Yep.
it's okay. But like I say,
Council has received all of your inputs.
But I'm looking for, if you can't prove me wrong,
Right.
endorse my work.
Yep, but thank you, sir. Okay, next up is Linda Jennings. The topic is climate change.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And name and city, please.
Linda Jennings, Anacortes. So I've been thinking about the World Economic Forum, and most of their impetus is accorded to climate change. So I've been doing some research on climate change, spent several hours listening to an astrophysicist talk about it, and I'm just distilling a few salient points because I do not like moving forward with something based on a false narrative, and especially an agenda such as they have. So climate, well, first of all, weather is local, and climate is determined in space. Climate stability is the exception, not the norm. But for the last 10,000 years, the Earth has been enjoying climate stability. The global mean temperature, which is what climate change is talking about, has been stable for 8,000 years. So generally, the World Economic Forum talks about an average temperature, but there's warming and there's cooling on different parts of the Earth. We are also in an interglacial period. We have been for 14,000 years, which is a period between ice ages. So we still have ice on the Earth, and it's still melting, and the purpose of that is to fill our rivers, which is where we are right now. We're still in the ice age. We're probably on the tail end and then approaching another ice age. This is taking millennia. Retreating ice has carved out valleys and fjords like Yosemite and many others. So the ice age is due to the shape of the Earth's orbit. This is where climate comes from. So the orbit changes. It's an elliptical pathway around the sun. The other is, so you're either closer or further from the sun, so you either have cooler weather patterns, cooler climate, warmer weather patterns. And it also has to do with the tilt of the axis of the Earth. And he goes into some detail about this astrophysicist I've been listening to. So global temperatures are a result of the Earth's distance from the sun, closer or further, and its axis. The ice age that we're in has a cooling effect on the Earth. So if there's any temperature warming because of human activity, it's balanced by the cooling effect of the ice age. So the current status of the climate, what he talks about, is perfect for flourishing of human life. That's why we're here right now in this weather pattern. And we're not in panic mode all the time now. We can diversify our agriculture. We can take time to pursue other things like music and education and all kinds of things. And that is allowing us to do so. And that's all I have to say, but I want you to consider that when you're looking at your climate change impact on your update
Thank you.
for planning.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have anybody else signed up to address council. Anybody here in the chambers that isn't signed up? And if you wanted to talk about either the transportation plan or the land capacity analysis, you'll have an opportunity then. Okay, I will move on to our consent agenda items 5A and B. Council.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Fantini.
I move that we approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Fantini, a second by Mr. Young to approve consent agenda items A and B. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is 6 and item 6A. This is a public hearing on ordinance 4082. This is a transportation improvement plan. This is a discussion item with possible action, but I'll officially open the public hearing and Mr. Rayum will introduce us to this subject.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a somewhat complicated topic, so I'm going to start with just a primer on terms. The first one is a transportation master plan, which Council, you approved us to develop. We're working on the modeling side, and then we go out to the public here soon. The transportation master plan has a 20-year lifespan. It goes alongside the comprehensive plan. The next item down is a 6-year transportation improvement plan, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. And the other item is, we all know about the capital facilities plan. Every year we update it, and it looks back 6 years. The transportation improvement plan also looks out 6 years, but what it does is it gets its information from the transportation master plan. So because I currently don't have a transportation master plan, I had to reverse engineer a 6-year transportation improvement plan so that we are in compliance with the RCW and have one in place by July 1st. The important part about that is grant funding. Basically, if you want federal or state funds to come into our city to build our transportation projects, we need to have a transportation improvement plan. In the past, we have used our capital facilities plan and handed that up to Skagit Council of Governments, I believe it's called. Is that the ex-COG? And they've been using that, but this is the proper way to hold a public hearing and go over the 6-year transportation improvement plan. So this year, it's reverse engineered. So next year, what this will do is help us figure out the transportation and capital investment of our next annual budget. That makes sense. So when it'll inform the transportation or the capital facilities plan the following winter. Does that make sense to all of you? Okay. So kind of with that, I have just a couple of slides. I just wanted to show you what we came up with. So this just kind of gives you the geographical spread of the projects. The project names are there as well. There was a couple I did want to point out. You're probably wondering, there's a couple of anomalies. I didn't just strictly follow the capital facilities plan. I did add the Guaymas Channel Trail because I figured if we could get funding for that, we want it on this transportation improvement plan, as well as South Commercial Phase 2 is what we're calling it, from 13th to 34th, where we'll fix all the ADA barriers as well as pave and add bike lanes. So those two I threw in there. I hope that's okay. If not, we can continue the public hearing and pull them back out. But those were the two that weren't authorized by council. The other thing I wanted to point out is that projects that were in our capital facilities plan to be done this year, there's 2 of them that you won't see on this list. One of them is the R Avenue Safety and Mobility project, as well as the South Commercial Phase 1, which is 11th to 13th, also known as the 12th and Commercial intersection.
You don't want to say roundabout. It's okay.
It's no longer a roundabout.
I know. I agree.
Yeah, we took that out back and took care of that. So, okay, so there's the geographical spread with the list of projects. This is a tabular form of that. The other thing, in the future, what I would like to have is like a percentage or some sort of numerical breakdown of federal, state, tribal, local, or unknown. We didn't have time for that, so we just put X's where we knew there was different funds coming into it. But in the future, you should be able to see that. So you know specifically the unknown part. It's good to know, especially if you're going to Olympia for legislative days or something like that. And I will keep going. We can go backwards too. So one other thing I want to show you, see how 2030 is rather anemic. I didn't have projects for 2030 in the capital facilities plan, so I didn't want to make any conclusions about. But again, in the future, we will have that information in the transportation improvement plan. The other part is in their transportation improvement plan, you want to include programs, and these are big programs for us. These are the ADA ramp replacement program, the annual pavement program, which is a lot, the non-motorized improvement program, and then the sidewalk trip hazard program. So we program those every year no matter what, so that's why I can easily say in 2030, well, one of them actually escalates each year, so I figured that out, but otherwise it's right out of the capital facilities plan. And that is my presentation. Ready for questions.
All right, I'm sure there'll be questions from the council. I want to make sure that members of the public, since it is a public hearing, want to comment on us working to get our process in correct order. Okay, yeah, sure, come on up. And all right, name and city, please.
Yeah, Teresa Baker, Anacortes. Two questions. First, the K and the intersection at 12th and K improvement. I don't know what that means. And does this plan have anything to do with repaving? Because the roads in Old Town are really bad, especially K on the other side of 12th. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on, don't go anywhere. I'll show you. So in the council packet, they had a description of 12th and K, and I'll give you my copy of it. I'm gonna have to come get it if they ask for
Okay.
it. There you go. There's that. And then the part about paving, yeah, that's one of our programs. So $1.8 million per year we invest in paving roads. And where we pave is something to be discussed soon in the future with the transportation master plan.
Yep. All right. Okay, council.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Young.
Mr. Rayum, just wanted to say what I appreciate about your comments as you were presenting this proposal, and is the honesty of backing into it because you don't have the other pieces because of other things, but that level of candor is important. And it really speaks volumes to, what's ahead. Yes, we love to see those additional items that are taking place, in the things that we want to do, but this is what we have, this is the timelines that we do. It's just not because of not doing the due diligence and the hard work. It's not because of that. It's just the way that we have to do it in order to meet the deadlines. So, of course, I'm looking for additional details, I am, and I'm looking for revisions to come and, thoughts and ideas. But what I appreciate about how you said it and brought it forward was that level of candor and showing these are important things to us that you're aware of. I appreciate that you added in those two things because I think that those are important. And so I just really kind of wanted to say thanks for that, for the hard work, but also, again, you're still relatively new, even though you don't have your new car smell anymore. But, just want you to know how much we appreciate what you're doing and the hard work that's going in. And I'm thankful for this level of detail that you're bringing forward. Thank you.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. So number 13, which is H Avenue, ACFL Connector Trail. I feel like that was going to be done last year, then it was going to be done this year. Can I get an update on that?
Sure, I heard it was 2 years ago. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was trying to be generous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I figured 1 year late's not actually late yet. And the other one is, can you go into more description about Kansas Avenue number 4? and kind of the impact on the surrounding areas. So those are my two questions.
Okay. So for the first one, that is in design. We've ran into a bit of a, what would you call it? There's a potential wetland impact. And so we're trying to work through that, and that's whenever environmental issues come up with it, it's just a trail, right? But it's a big deal. So we are working on that. It's a 30-50% design.
Okay.
It's not that big of a project to
It's going to be
design.
a gravel trail, right? I mean,
Correct.
that's the finished product just removed from that road.
We're just nicking a wetland is the
Yeah.
problem. So
Okay.
that's, I don't know, I can't speak for the last 2 years, but we started this project since I've been here, and we got to a point now we needed to stop for a second. What's that?
We're still in design phase.
We're
We're
still
not
in
ready to
design.
like put the gravel down.
I would love to put the gravel down, but we cannot do that
Okay.
yet. And then the other question was Kansas, and I believe that is the piece, let's see, it's the unimproved Kansas Avenue from West 3rd to West 2nd. It's just that one section of it, improved street network and pedestrian safety, adding direct route to arterial collector network, which is Oaks.
Right. I guess my question is, are we putting in sidewalks? I mean, we've heard a lot from this neighborhood about safety concerns and traffic. Does that include sidewalks on one side, on both sides? I just was kind of curious. I mean, $550,000 doesn't seem like much compared to all of the other projects we're doing. And so I just wanted to have an understanding of what the scope of work would be for there, and if we have concerns that it should have sidewalks.
So we haven't designed, I'm trying to get to the calendar for when this one is to go to design, but yeah, 550,000, I would assume not curb and gutter and sidewalks. It could be, you know, a wide road with fog lines with, you know, paved shoulders type of thing. I understand this part's really steep too, so there is some cost in trying to build a road on a hill.
Okay, I guess I would want, before that goes too far forward, I'd want to make sure that any safety concerns would be addressed, and we're not just kind of going out there paving areas just because they haven't been put through. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be discussed about the West Streets when we get into the transportation master plan. And then, so yeah, design begins in 2026, and your current CFP, which that's all going to probably be kind of upended, I think, after we do the transportation master plan, but that's where it's at now.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
I just want to make sure, thank you earlier for the information. I just wanted to check on a couple of things. Thank you for your concern about about Kansas there. From what I've heard from everyone to Rock Ridge all the way down to West 2nd, that's been a project that's been talked about for a long time. And just so that I'm clear, we are going to have an opportunity to kind of go more in depth on what that project should be. We don't necessarily need to do that right now, but there is going to be an opportunity to put specs forth from council, if I may, about what should happen there.
Yes. Yeah, the transportation master plan is a 20-year plan, and they'll have some detail about what it is the community and the council want.
Because I'm less concerned. I mean, I think it's great to go through, but what my biggest concern is around safety for that area. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic. It's already a very speedy part of town, and we have stop signs at every intersection. So I just want to make sure that there's going to be an opportunity, so I'm glad to hear that there will be. I also had some questions around what looked like to be, is the tip number, is that like the order of, that's not the order of operation, is it? Or is,
No,
that's
the mayor
just,
pointed out too. We just made a spreadsheet, and we started at 1 and went down from the capital facilities plan. Has no priority, it just helps us label basically the dots on the map. With
awesome, because I had concerns about, well, not concerns, but just questions about that 12th and K Avenue intersection. I really don't understand what the improvement is there that needs to happen. And I also was kind of factoring in, since we do have a plan to dramatically improve 12th and Commercial, which will most likely change the flow of traffic through 12th Street, rather than spend the money on that intersection, I'd love to see kind of what effects happen at 12th and Commercial first. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick.
Thank you. So at the very beginning of this presentation, you said this is something that this has to be updated annually, right? So is it a living, breathing document that's going to be on the website somewhere, or is this primarily what y'all use when you put in your grant applications?
So it has to be updated every year for grant applications and progress statements and everything for any federal or state grant.
And it feeds from the capital facilities plans and will feed into the transportation master plan, so it's sort of redundant, but necessary to get money.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. So number 8, the 11th to 13th Street improvements. I was just wondering if you could give us a brief funding update on that.
Sure. So I am waiting on WashDOT specifically to get back to me. I have a 30% design, a 30% cost estimate for a signalized intersection, and now I'm just waiting to find out if anybody's going to pull their grant funds, and if they are, how much.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds like a question I ask him every day. And which council meeting will he be coming to present that to council? Sorry.
Okay, great. I also am wondering about the Oaks Avenue curb gutter and sidewalks for $1 million. Do we have a sense of where that will start, where it will end? Is it one side of the street? I know there have been a lot of improvements there over the years, so just curious about what this next section is.
So it was in the CFP when I got here. I don't know. There is no design for it at this point. So yeah, it's probably up for discussion about what we as a community want to see there.
Okay, great. And then the Shannon Point Trail in 2025 for $50,000, that's number 14. I'm wondering if the leadership out at Shannon Point do we know for sure they're on board with this?
That would be a parks question, but I would assume that we are working with them, and I know John's here. He doesn't want to be put on the spot. So I don't know. Obviously, we're not going to build the trail if they don't want it there. So.
Okay, great. All right, thanks.
And just another process question for council to be aware of. So if you want to make changes to this, you certainly can, but that would require leaving the public hearing open.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Really quickly on project number 7, I imagine it's similar to project number 8, only maybe less far along in the process. We've got dollar items for this year, next year, and the following. Do we have line of sight as to state dollars for this year, next year, or is that still largely up in the air at this point?
So for number 8 or number 7?
7, the
Okay,
big,
so for number
big commercial
7,
avenue.
we put in that there might be state funds because we asked for a third of it to be covered by the state for the ADA ramps. And it's about a third of the cost of the project. So, so we're hoping we can get that. That is a real number, the 3.4 million to do what we've talked about at previous council meetings, and then the 6 million, 18 million, 18 million, 18 million. That's based on the South Commercial Corridor Plan. So that's another thing we can talk about through the Transportation Master Plan if that's where we want to put that money and work on that. But that first one is to try to pave and fix all the ADA ramps on.
Yeah, and that one's largely like, at least it's in the process, like, I guess largely going to happen in the next 12, 18 months.
I have an approved set of plans from WashDOT, and we're ready to go.
Cool.
So,
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions there? And I think based on the feedback, I think I can close the public hearing. This doesn't mean council has to take action on this tonight because it's a 2-read rule anyway. So if you got any further questions, but I will go ahead and close the public hearing on this one. And any more questions, feel free to reach out to Mr. Am. And then we'll plan on bringing it back at next council meeting for 2-read rule ordinance. Okay, thank you. Next up is item 7A on other business. This is resolution 3158, lodging tax funding for the Rick Epling Foundation of the Arts Christmas concert. This is discussion and possible action, and LTAC, I would either say Mr. Coleman or Mr. Walters, but Mr. Coleman, you're on.
All right, thank you, Council, Mayor, John Coleman, Director of the Planning, Community, and Economic Development Department. The title kind of says it all on this one. We received a request from the Rick Epting Foundation for $3,000 so that they can make sure that the Arts Christmas concert is able to go on this year. As you can see in the agenda bill, they're planning to have the event at the Broadniak Hall since the transit shed is gone, and well, I guess it's not gone, but it's gone as an event that people can event center that people can still use. And they estimate the cost to the sponsor is $7,000, and they've requested $3,000 to cover the rest of the funds necessary to have this event go on. The LTAC committee met and recommended the city council approve the $3,000 spending of the LTAC funds, and there's a recommended motion in the agenda bill.
Council, questions?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
This idea has sort of come up before, and what I appreciate about it is that in our effort, having chaired the LTAC committee up until recently when Mr. Walters took over, so much of our town has been about trying to, one, encourage visitors to come, two, encourage people to shop in heads and beds in downtown, and just the vibrancy of our downtown. And there are many small towns that are not successful regardless of all of the efforts that they put forward. The good news about Anacortes is, it's a fabulous place. And, does it take effort and events in order to keep people coming and wanting to be here? Absolutely. And so even just like before with one of the other events, sometimes we have to step forward and help good events come forward. And so anyway, I'm very much supportive of this initiative because I think it does bring people to our town, brings Anacortes people out, and so it's a positive thing.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
I just wanted to say first that I appreciate the fact that this is an event that is free to the community, but that any revenue created by sale of VIP seating or donations at the door will be granted to the Anacortes High School Arts Program. So I think that's a great thing. I also wanted to point out, as we are at a time where LTAC dollars are precious, as we discuss our event center, I think it's important to recognize one of the reasons that this is a yes for me is because when you look at the breakdown of the folks that are coming from out of town, there are significant numbers of people that will be coming from out of town to see this concert, therefore leading to more LTAC dollars through the restaurants, through hotel stays, at a time of year when it's not peak tourist season. And so that's a really great thing. So I appreciate this application and the LTAC committee's recommendation to approve it.
Any other questions or maybe motion?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick?
Thank you. As I see the board president in the audience, I would like to also invite their organization to come back and to give us a presentation. I noticed in the lodging tax advisory request for funding that there's going to be a survey given at the actual event. And so one of the things that we do love hearing about is how people have spent their time in our town. So that being said, I move to approve Resolution 3158 using $3,000 of lodging tax funds to fund the Rick Epting Foundation of the Arts Christmas Concert 2024.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Hubick, second by Mr. Fantini to approve Resolution 3158. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Fantini?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is item 7B. This is an interlocal agreement with Skagit County for the Thompson Trail Trestle Feasibility Study funding. Discussion item, possible action. Mr. Lunsford.
Evening, Mayor, Council. Hope you're all well. We have an opportunity to collaborate with another partner, in this case Skagit County, to help us with some funding for the Thompson Trail feasibility study. So the county approached us with some funds that they had. I believe they came through Department of Ecology to help us with our studies. So primarily there's two things they'd like to do with this. And we've partnered with the county before. When the trestle caught fire, of course, they were supportive partners of that. So there's a couple things that we'd like to do in adding them to our partnership, which already includes the Samish Nation and the State Department of Natural Resources. So we would like to have them help us create collaborative informational signs that we would use on the trail to inform the public of what's going on. We'd like to do some public meetings with them. They have a great base of resources at the Marine Resource Center. So if they can bring their scientists to help the community understand what's going on and why, that's a great benefit to us. We also want to make 3 at least 1-minute videos that we put on social media and other areas so folks could understand the what behind this process. So why are we looking at the process, how the bay is going to benefit, how it will help salmonoid species, et cetera, and the Salish Sea. So that's the essence of the collaboration. It's about, you have the number in front of you, it's about $58,000. And then the bulk of that will go to help with our research, because we, in our research that we've already contracted with Hansen Professional Services Incorporated, looking at how the pollution that we find in the bay if we remove the riprap and the creosote, how that will be transmitted by the tides, et cetera. So we need to know that in baseline information as we go to understand the process of replacement. So we are looking at geotechnical analysis, we're looking at bathymetric surveys to understand what's there physically, but we also need to understand the pollution and the mobility of that pollution, and this funding will help us get there as well. So that will all create a better baseline for us to understand the feasibility of this project when we come back to you when we're completed and tell you what we found. And these scientists will help us do that along the way and inform the public. So that is the process. So, and then we'll be at Fidalgo Bay Days too, just to help kind of have a booth there. So a lot of public outreach in the next 7 months, and this research that can get done by the end of the year on the pollution that could be underneath the causeway or in the creosote pilings. Any questions you might have?
All right, council questions.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
Again, I'm bearing compliments only because they're due. Trust me, when they're not, I still would be diplomatic. But in this case, John, I really appreciate, again, the depth of detail that you bring to explaining what we're doing, not just for those that are on your committee, that, we go into the details about it because we met about it, but also for the public to understand exactly what's taking place, what are the steps associated with it, how and what we're looking for, that we're not just willy-nilly going in to make some changes just simply because we want to, but we're really doing the due diligence to make sure that the analysis is working and is working for the greater good of what we're attempting to do. And further, what I am so excited about is I continue to hear the collaborations that are coming, not only between the work of the city itself and partners, whether that's public-private or other nations that you work with, but you really do bring people to the table for them to have input. So everybody is a stakeholder and everyone cares. So those resources that are available, whether it's to the city or whether it's to the tribe or whether it's some private individual that cares enough about the issue, is allowed to bubble forward and to come to the table. And I really appreciate that. I think this is one of the things in projects that you and I have already spoken about a number of times, and I've spoken to the mayor about it. But, I really do appreciate, how do we help our water? How do we help our bay? And these are things that have to be addressed because, again, so much of our food, our recreation, the things that make us love this place as much as we all do, is tied to its success. And so this is good work, I think, that will bear fruit, and I'm excited about this initial seeding dollars to see what might happen, and I look forward to the subsequent conversations that you will bring back to council and the public to let us know what you're finding, good, bad, or indifferent, how do we address it, and how do we move forward as a family of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Any other questions?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
One quick one for you. So this is, the signage that you're talking about, that is to go up to educate people about what we're doing.
Correct.
Okay,
That'd be
sounds
on
great.
Mr. Fantini, that'd be probably on the trail itself, in the work zones. The videos would be on social media and other ways that we could get out so folks who don't walk around the trail can see it. But we want folks, wherever they're at, to have a better understanding. And the public meetings would be probably here, the senior center, the library, so folks could come and attend those with the scientists back there. I mean, I'm happy to collaborate with these things, but I'm not a scientist. So I'm happy to bring them together to give the public the answers that they need from the research that's ongoing.
Great. I really appreciate that, because in my short time on council, if there's one thing I definitely learned is if we spend the time on educating the public, it doesn't create a vacuum where all kinds of things fly into it. So I'm very supportive of this.
All right. Any other questions?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
I move that City Council authorize the mayor to execute interlocal cooperation agreement 23092 PRK 004 between the City of Anacortes and Skagit County.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Moulton and a second by Mr. McDougall to approve the interlocal City of Anacortes and Skagit County as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hebeck.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item is 7C. This is land capacity analysis. So I forgot to mention, I think it was just last week where we had our first open comp plan meeting, so appreciate everybody that came out for that one. I think it was a presentation was this part of that as well. But this is a discussion item, no action, so I'd encourage any member of the public that wishes to engage in this discussion, please do so. And now we'll try to remember to call on you. Mr. Coleman.
Good evening again. John Coleman, Director of Planning, Community, and Economic Development. Thank you, Mayor, Council, members of the public. Tonight, we just wanted to present to the City Council in an official format the land capacity analysis that the city's consultants have worked on for us. As a refresher, as part of our comprehensive plan update process, we've received population allocations for what our likely growth scenario is going to be. So as part of the process to make sure that we, through our 2025 comprehensive planning process, looking 20 years into the future, making sure that we can accommodate that, the land capacity analysis is a study of the available land within the city to accommodate the various types of growth, whether commercial, residential, or industrial, and making sure that we have the available land to do that. And if we don't have enough land based on the type of zoning that we have in place, then we know that we need to make land use policy changes and zoning changes to make sure that we do have the proper amount of land to accommodate our projected future growth. So this same presentation, I have just used our consultants' PowerPoint presentation that they gave to the Planning Commission on May 22nd. So I encourage everybody to watch that presentation because the consultant went into a little bit more detail. I didn't want to totally present that again because I know that a lot of city council members and members of the public have already seen that. But I did want people to know that they can go back to that Planning Commission meeting and view the video or see the documents. Also, those materials are available on our 2025 comp plan update website, which is available through the PCED website. Also, some of these topics were discussed briefly at the open house that we had on June 5th. Thank you to those that came out. Hopefully that gave some background to what we're trying to do and highlighted the fact that we're building on our 2016 comprehensive plan, which was a major planning effort in 2016. And so we don't intend to redo and rewrite the comp plan, but build on what we already have. And so we presented at the open house to people what that plan was about, and solicited people's feedback and about where we would like to go in the future, knowing that we're very early in the process. There's many, many, many more meetings where people will be able to give feedback. So with that, I'll just jump right into this land capacity analysis. And what the consultants did is they, part of the analysis looked at growth since 2013. And so this shows the numbers in this handy chart on the right. And you can see, you know, we've seen some spikes, we've seen some dips, and that's how growth patterns happen. So we try to resist the urge to see like 1 year, like a whole bunch of stuff has happened, but then take into consideration maybe the 2 or 3 years before or after that, it has been less. So it's a little bit cyclical, but we look at that long-term trend. For 2024, we're halfway through the year. And I don't have the figures on here, but we have a similar number of building permit applications, so units similar to 2023's total. So we're not going gangbusters, but we're at least outperforming 2023 so far as far as the number of units. I don't have the breakdown of types of units. This chart, which is probably impossible to read on your computer, is showing where units have been built, and the yellow are the single-family residential type, and the multifamily you can see focused mostly along the Commercial Avenue corridor area, and then can't remember the name of the co-housing project off of D Street also. You see those are the larger developments. And then we're also looking at commercial. So commercial always is kind of spotty like this. Sometimes you get a big commercial building, sometimes you get a hotel, and so you don't see a whole lot of consistency, and projects tend to be a little bit larger, so it does look kind of spiky when things happen. This shows where commercial development is happening, largely out in the Padilla Heights area is where we've seen a lot of the permits since 2013, and then of course, not surprisingly, focused along the Commercial Avenue corridor and near downtown. A large project out at the airport as well. So that brings us to the land capacity analysis itself. As I mentioned, we have projections. Their existing population from the time that this was done was so that would be the 2022 numbers, 17,983, and we're projecting 4,988 new residents over the next 20 years. And so these graphs just show that growth in relation to the new to the existing. Similar with the jobs projections versus the 9,503 jobs already in town. On the right, you see the 4,988 units broken down by housing types, or not housing types, but in the income bands. And so I think we've talked a lot about this. Under the GMA updates, we now have to make sure that we're making zoning possible for all the different types of housing units, and housing types are loosely associated with income bands. So I have a slide on that coming up here, so I'll discuss that more. But you can see in those lower earning income bands, that's where we're seeing a large amount of need. And then also a similar 577 in the 120 above area median income, which is going to be largely single family houses and more expensive condominium type things. So the land capacity analysis, what our consultant did is they looked at every parcel by parcel analysis of the land in the city. And they created 3 different classifications, whether property is vacant, and so that would be where the value is less than $10,000. So it's either vacant or it's got like a small outbuilding or something out there, no significant development. Partially used is going to be low and medium density residential zones that are large enough to be subdivided. And so that means there's maybe a small house in a higher density residential area where or even in a lower density area where there's enough land to subdivide it and create other lots. And then redevelopable is another category. That's where the building value is less than the land value. So that means that the land has a lot of value, but the house or the structure on there does not have a lot of value assigned to it by the assessor. And that's an indicator that can be used to determine whether or not that land is likely to redevelop in the near future. So if you've got a small single family house that is not in good shape in a commercial zone, its land value is probably going to be higher than the building value, in which case we've given it that's an indicator that it's probably redevelopable. That's a lot that somebody's probably going to buy and either redevelop with, or there's a potential for it to be purchased and redeveloped with either multifamily, mixed use, or commercial, and get more building value out of that in the long run. It's important to point out that critical areas such as wetland streams, habitats, and unstable slopes have been removed from developable areas in this land capacity analysis, and so those are overlaid on here. And again, I apologize, this is practically impossible to read at this scale, but if you look at the documents online, there's, especially if you're able to zoom in on it. This is the same chart, or the same map. I wanted to point out that the consultant looked at this and presented it to staff, and then we went over it parcel by parcel with them, and we're like, okay, that doesn't look quite right. Like, there's something like that property is owned by this entity, and it can't redevelop, or that's a laydown yard in the port. Like, it's not likely to redevelop it. It's an important use. Or if they just missed something, the assessor stated it's not always very clean. So we worked with them through 2 rounds to make sure that that their work was as good as possible. There's probably parcels here and there that are not totally perfect, but this is not intended to be a perfect model. This is intended to give us a really good idea of our developable land. And if we've missed any individual parcels, we apologize. If we've miscategorized things, this is not intended to say like everything that is labeled as vacant is going to redevelop, and not everything that's labeled as developable is expected to be redeveloped. It's just given the opportunity. For example,
sounds like Mr. Young and this Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhlman. You know, I think I was at that meeting, and I think Mr. Fantini was there, and probably others watching it. It was very interesting. And I know this may not be the question for you, because what you're presenting here is, if I'm correct, what you're showing is just simply possible land that may be developed to accommodate the growth that may happen over the next 20 years. It's not whether or not it's fabulous land, moderate land, none of that. It really goes into that. And I see that. I guess, you know, each time I was a little stunned, and I know this may not be your question. I don't believe this is your question, but I'm still at pause about looking at March Point, and to think that, you know, it's land, yes, and trying to make that land enticable for a possible developer to come out and build housing near the refinery. Now, there are some things that we would have to overcome in that process, or the builder will have to overcome. And I know it's not your issue, John. I mean, Mr. Coleman, I just want to be clear about that. You're presenting here the thought about where land is and how it might be able to make sure that the people that are coming here, the growth, it could be in those areas. But I just still struggle with that a little bit. So I'm curious if also on the table we look at expansion of the city, I mean the city boundaries. Is that being considered in this thought? Because I think that it's a part of it, but I don't know if that's a question for
I'm getting that. I'm getting to
okay.
that one.
All right, good.
So you bring up an interesting point. So what you see here is the obvious thing that you see here is on March's point. There's lots of land that is considered redevelopable. So that's just everybody probably knows out there's large tracts of lands that are underused or not used at all. So we've given that as redevelopable, which means there is a possibility for the property owner or somebody that purchased the property to do further development on it. Now, it's important to clarify that the zoning that this entire analysis was done based on the existing zoning. So that's heavy industrial out there on March's point. So there would be no possibility of building housing out there. That's not even a concept. That would be, there is just room on that land for the refineries possibly to further develop their property with the type of use that is allowed in that zoning. So this is not an advertisement for property speculators to look at and say, oh, there's large tracts of land available here. This is really just an analysis to say there is land that is unbuilt on or has the ability to be further developed. And so because there's that potential, that's where we're expecting growth to happen.
I totally get that. I guess, what I didn't say early on was that, the idea of, personally, I may not want to be near industrial. I may not want to be near industrial, but if this plan or demonstration to show where possible housing could be, because I'm still a little confused, and you may bring it in later on, but if that's industrial, where is the housing possibility? And does that seem to suggest that given the current zoning is one thing, you're also saying that it still leaves the possibility of us changing the zoning to something else?
So what we're
am I making?
Yeah, and
okay.
I'm gonna get to those points. This is
okay.
This
That's
is the
good.
very basic point of first we just started to look at what land has the potential to be developed. That's where we're at right now, and then we move on to the next steps of looking at it by its zoning. This entire document looks at it based on its current zoning, not making any assumptions of changing zoning. What I'll get to is, this is going to be a tool after you looking at this based on our current zoning, then we'll be able to say, okay, if we need to change anything, then any zoning wise to accommodate our future growth, then we make those policy decisions using this as a tool to understand what we have.
Totally get it. Last part, Mayor, if you allow me, is that all this is, what you're saying is all this does, it shows us land that's either industrial, or it could be used for industrial, or it can be used for housing. It just shows us available possibilities. And then going forward, the market or however it works out will determine whether it's housing or whether it's used for industrial. This whole thing just says there's land for what we need, and these are the places that they are.
That's what this slide does, yes.
Okay,
But
thank you.
the land capacity analysis does do an individual, looking at all of the developable, redevelopable, and partially developable lands, and look at the underlying zoning, and that information I'm going to be presenting here as we go along.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think Ms. Cleland McGrath had a question earlier. Okay, all right, yeah, we'll see if he covers it all.
All right, so this next is talking about accessory dwelling units. So what we've done is, the Commerce guidance says, there's probably a lot of potential for accessory dwelling units in a town. And if you look at this map, you'll see all sorts of yellow on here. The yellow is properties that, as we understand, could accommodate an accessory dwelling unit, whether it's, you convert a portion of your basement or a portion of your garage, or if you build a detached ADU, zoning allows for it here. There's going to be all sorts of different site constraints, possibly homeowners association rules, possibly critical areas nearby. But this just is saying, based on zoning, all of these areas that are yellow could potentially see an ADU happen. But Commerce doesn't want cities to just solve all of their future growth problems by saying, oh, we'll just allow ADUs everywhere, because that's not a reality. So what we're doing is we're making a very low assumption of all of these potential lands, properties that could house an ADU. We're going to assume over 20 years that 5% of owners may choose to build an ADU. So that's a very small number, resulting in a capacity of 357 ADUs to be built over the next 20 years. And that is very consistent with the number of units that have been built, a number of ADU units that have been permitted over the past few years. I think that breaks down to 18 units, and we've seen something like 12, 11 and a half or 12 units per year on average. So it's a little bit more, but rules are also changing for ADUs. The state is going, as we go through this at the end of the comp plan process, we will need to allow 2 ADUs on every single family on every residential lot. So there will be more capacity, but we're not going to assume that there's going to be a flood of them, but we are prepared for future ADUs. So that brings us to the results. I'm going to skip over the zone and by zone analysis, and I really didn't want to get into like looking at parcel by parcel, because I'm sure everybody could find problems with the maps. But remember, we're doing a high-level review, and we've done as much fine-tuning as financially prudent. So what we've seen here is we have a capacity for 4,369 residential units. And the we already have, so how is this showing it? We have a projection of needing 2,942 more. And then the jobs allocations are based on also the zoning type. So if it's light industrial or heavy industrial, you assume there's fewer number of jobs per square foot versus like a retail or office situation where you'll have a lot more people per square foot. And so this the land capacity analysis takes all that into account, and also looked at job types. So our information does say the kind of jobs in sectors that we're expecting growth in, and so it does break it down by that as well. And what these two show is based on our existing zoning, we have the capacity to meet our residential and our commercial industrial jobs growth. That's
Mayor
not the
Miller?
end of the story, though.
Mayor Miller?
And
Yeah,
I'll get
Mr.
into that.
McDougall.
The jobs classification data, I don't recall seeing it in the report. Do we have that, or is it available in a separate, I guess, piece of media?
We have a lot of information. I can so what I can see if I can chase down whatever specific information you're looking for if it's not on our website.
Yeah, just I guess, the high level, like here are the classifications and the projected numbers, or, the projected, numbers that would fill each of those classifications. I would be very interested, like, sometime in the next week or so.
Yeah, that's not the first time I've heard that question, so yeah, we'll see if we can track that one
thank
down.
you.
It's a good question.
So what's new this year, what's different than what we did in the 2016 update is the House Bill 1220 requirements. And so they require several things. One is to break down the zoning capacity based by income band for residential units, which I spoke to a bit. We have to address emergency housing, which we also do show in our land capacity analysis. We do an adequate provisions analysis, which ensures a recent production aligns with need, and analysis of barriers to the production of housing. And then we have to address racially disparate impacts. We have to do an analysis of our existing codes and comp plan to make sure that there's not anything in there that could prevent certain classes of people or color people from living or working in some place. So the obvious example is making sure that there's no redlining,
Mr. Young.
latent stuff. in
No,
there.
just wanted to sort of add on to that, John. I appreciate it. There are still rules on the books in some cities and some places around our world that said that you can't sell to, live in, if you're anything other than the majority. If you're brown, anything other than that, there are still certain rules that are there, that are on the books. And I think that this sort of begins to address and challenge cities and organizations and groups to sort of take another look at their rules and make sure that it doesn't impact others, because a legacy of impact has been devastating for so many. And what I appreciate about what we are attempting to do here is just make sure everyone is at the table and everyone is equally having an opportunity to come forward. Thank you. I just wanted to add that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, if we have any sundown or red line rules in our code,
We don't have anything
yeah.
egregious in our code. We may have some things that is going to be suggested to be changed by Commerce, but we don't have anything like blatantly racist or. So, the housing needs by income. So as I mentioned earlier, anything you can see on the right, anything over the 120 AMI is going to be single-family homes, low-density single-family, and some more expensive middle housing. The moderate income bands from 80 to 120 AMI is going to be your middle housing type. So that's duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and the low-income housing, the guidance from Commerce says to serve the 0 to 50 is going to be multifamily and maybe a little bit of ADUs, and then the 51 to 80 also falls into that multifamily and ADUs. Oh, and one other thing is we need to provide for permanent supportive housing. So that often a question is, so that's defined by the state as subsidized leased housing for people who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness and living with a disabled condition. So that's when you see the PSH, that's on this chart here. Of the, I don't have the total number there on the left-hand column. I apologize. I'm not going to try to do the math on the fly, but we need to provide for some permanent supportive housing and then just non-permanent supportive housing in that 0 to 30. And this graphically shows what I had shown on a table earlier. Based on the information that the land capacity analysis did, it looked at those types of housing that I've already discussed, and it it actually identifies the additional capacity. So how many units, based on the zoning that we have within our current city limits, how many we can handle, how many we can accommodate in each of those zones. And then you put the numbers together, and what you can see is the housing needs on the left and the number that we can accommodate on the right, and then on the far right you can see this that there is a surplus in each of the zones. So we're able to, under our current zoning, we're able to accommodate the more than the needed number of housing types that we're required to have. So one little side note about this, learned last week that the population allocations that we've been working with the county, go back to that document. Don't have it on here, I apologize. The housing allocation numbers that the county, Skagit Council of Governments Steering Committee adopted, and those are the numbers, the official numbers that we're working with, left 89 units for rural areas in the counties in the 0 to 30 AMI, and 57 units in the 31 to 50% AMI. So that's a total of, I should have totaled this up. Of those, the county is now getting information from the Department of Commerce that Commerce is not going to support counties, rural counties, putting those 0 to 50% AMI bands in rural areas. Largely because, as I described in here, those 0 to 50 are served by multifamily, and the Growth Management Act doesn't allow multifamily housing in rural areas, which makes sense, and we did make a lot of accommodations for that in these preliminary figures. And we only left like 10% of what they would otherwise have been allocated, but the Department of Commerce is now giving them the feedback that they're not going to be able to accommodate any of that in the rural areas. We're still going through the machinations on that and determining what's going to happen.
John, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure it's clear. I know typically there aren't rural areas inside the city limits, but is it more accurate to say in unincorporated areas, or is rural the more accurate?
By rural areas, what I mean is outside of cities, outside of urban growth areas, outside of like any urban area. Like we're talking about out in the county, outside of any city jurisdiction.
Including urban growth areas.
Including the urban growth areas.
Gotcha.
So while this is frustrating because it's coming down late, and I'm still waiting for clarification from Commerce. We only found out about this last week, so I'm checking in with Commerce to see what their guidance is going to be. The good news is, if we continue the allocation process the way we've done it, which would mean 21% of each of these categories go to Anacortes, 20% go to Burlington, 30-something% goes to Mount Vernon, and like 19% goes to Cedar-Woolley. And then, so what that would mean is Anacortes would have 27 more units in the 0 to 30 and 17 more units in the 30 to 50. So it's a small number. So it will fit into our land capacity analysis, because as I demonstrated here at the end of this document is, oh good Lord, excuse me, is that there is plenty of capacity to cover that small amount. And this is very early, but since it's come up, I wanted to let the council know that this could be an issue that we're going to be talking about and going through.
All right.
So you can see plenty of surplus What we haven't talked about is, we still have the ability to change our zoning as necessary to accommodate these types of housing the way we feel necessary. And so this is not the end of the story saying we're not going to change our zoning, we're not going to add to our urban growth area, but we don't need to unless we want to make certain zoning decisions.
All right, so ready to discuss, ready to open it up for any public comment, Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, sorry, I went on a little long.
No, that's okay. Just want to make sure we. All right, I'll open it up for public comment. Yeah, come on up. He's not going anywhere.
Teresa Baker, Anacortes. I just wanted to ask about MJB, KBR. I don't know what that place is called. It's in red. MJB. That's what it is. MJB. Yeah. Are you going to talk about that?
Yeah, since you brought it up, I can talk a little bit about MJB. So with MJB, we use that as a special case. You can see that on the map. It's shown as a different color. That's because as part of their application materials for their long plat, they did specify in their traffic plan specifically what they planned, like the number of units that they were thinking of accommodating and the type of commercial use that they're going to include. So we just used, instead of making assumptions about what might go there, we just used what they said would go there in their application materials. That's why it's shown in it. We have like definitive numbers for that area. And that's why it's shown in a different color. So instead of guessing, we just use the numbers that they gave us.
All right, anybody else in the public? And this is a discussion item, but so we'll council.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
First, Mr. Coleman, thank you very much. You and your staff, you're probably my least envied person right now as you go through this. This is a very, very large undertaking. I also wanted to thank the Planning Commission for their meeting. I think it must have been 2 Wednesdays ago now. I attended that, and I just really, it made me realize the importance of the Planning Commission, because they asked a lot of really great questions, which led to a lot more information. So coming into this meeting, being the newer member of council, I could kind of know some places to look and get some more information. A couple of things that I noticed just in the presentation. I know one of the big wins that we had out of 2016 is that our mix of housing has improved with the changes from that comprehensive plan. But while I think it's great that we have a mix of housing, I think I can speak for a lot of folks in Anacortes that the most important thing is not just the mix of housing, but the affordability of the housing. So like I see that there's been a lot of cottages built, which is great, adds to the mix of housing. Are those affordable houses? Not really, not within the AMI. So what that kind of brings me to is if we have the capacity to meet the goals, because there's not a lot of land available, that we're not able to build out on March's Point, not that we would want to, because it's industrial. But if we have if we don't have a lot of land available, what that leads me to kind of believe is that the only way that we are going to meet these 20-year growth projection numbers is to increase density. And as I think back to what Anacortes looked like 20 years ago, before that big growth, and then I look to what Anacortes might look like in 20 years, if the only way that we have to really meet that those housing number goals are by increasing density, it's a very different looking place. So one of the things that I wanted to emphasize also from the Planning Commission is the question was brought up and asked about the family size that we are considering this from. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I took my notes. And yes, people can go watch the Planning Commission, but these are just important points for those that don't watch the Planning Commission meeting that I just thought was important to illuminate. The model that kind of gives us these numbers changed our family size from 2.4 to 1.9. Is that accurate?
I don't recall the discussion on that. There was a long discussion about that, but again, it was for modeling purposes. Is what I recall, and correcting for something I can't speak eloquently about that.
I'm pretty sure it was, but you can let me know about that. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that we put a lot of stock in ADUs. I think you had that said it was a 5%, but we're hoping for 5%, or we're looking at 5%. And then the question was asked about what have our ADUs been building at? What has been the rate of the ADUs? And it was 1%. And then I kind of look at the yellow map and I'm like, there's a ton of dots on this yellow map, but way more than 5%. So that was just areas that ADUs could be built, not necessarily places where we think ADUs are going to be built. Is that the yellow dot, right?
And like I said, we've been experiencing about almost 12 ADUs per year since I think it was 2009 when we started allowing ADUs. And now we're assuming 18 units or 18 ADUs per year. So it's not a huge jump in expectations for ADUs. It's a moderate increase.
Great, okay. One of the things that was encouraging for me, though, or that I felt encouraged by, is it looks like that we can count the numbers of our housing increase. It doesn't start in 2025. Those numbers actually, we can start keeping track of them in 2021. Is that?
Yeah, because this is a long planning process, we started the numbers back in 2021 or 2022. And so, yeah, we're planning from really that time when the information we had when we started this process, which is 2022, out till 2045.
So as kind of a graph guy, it would be great to kind of see like what our progress is so far in some of these areas. Because if 2021, 2022, 2023, that's at the end of 2024, we'll have even more. It'd be great to see kind of like where we are with that. The more I dug into this, the more I just kind of, I became a little bit concerned because I don't, yes, we add cottages and that's supposed to bring down, or that's supposed to help make things more affordable, but I don't necessarily see that happening. It would be different if we could throw like 70 cottages on the market at one time. That might help, but it looks like it's kind of almost having the reverse effect because the units, even though they're different, aren't yet affordable. Would you say that's?
Well, I don't know what the price is. Every unit is not created the same. Some are more expensive, some are less expensive. And I believe those would fall in the 80 to 120, so less than a single family.
Okay.
And this chart represents the number of housing units that we've produced over the past. So is this the kind of chart that you were interested in seeing?
Yeah, it just makes me nervous because we don't have a lot of land here, and since everything is denser, what would happen if, let's say, we do all of this and folks decide that they don't go denser and we just stay the same? Like if people don't build what we want them to build, what happens in that case? Obviously more people can't move into town, but are there negative effects from the state that happen if we create the code to favor it, but it doesn't happen?
No, I mean, these are not mandates. We're putting in place planning measures to make sure we can accommodate future growth, and making it much more detailed by saying we're trying to accommodate growth in many different area median income sectors. Those are the bands. So that is our responsibility. These are not targets that we need to hit.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
why I like to say projections and not targets.
Got it. Because my number one thing is that we can make housing more. I'm not worried about having a ton more housing added. I'm worried about keeping housing or getting housing to be more affordable that we have. So anyway, thank you.
Well, hopefully HACS, our Housing Affordability and Community Services Council Committee, is helping the city put into place policies to make housing affordable. Like, we're doing it with our zoning, we've done it with allowing the different types of housing units, making sure that mixed use and higher density residential are allowed, but we can't make people build it.
Yeah, and council passed a strategic plan towards that end that I know there's still a lot of things to work on. I think,
How long have we had that HACS committee for?
I think there's some other discussion.
Can I
that,
answer?
Yeah, Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Thank you. So I want to be really clear. I don't feel that it's council's responsibility to make housing more affordable. Our responsibility is to make sure that we look at our current land capacity and what our projections are and figure out how far off we are between those two, like what the range is between what we have and what, in theory, the county and the state are saying we may have. And from the Planning Commission watching that meeting, it sounded like with the consultant that we're at a fairly consistent growth. We're not expecting some spike or slowing. It's kind of how it's been the last 20 years at that pace. That being said, I was curious why the slide you have up here doesn't include cottage housing pulled out as a separate type. Is there a reason for that?
I'll have to ask the consultant. They put this together.
And the reason I get to that, it's not I don't think that's an issue currently at the land capacity issue here, but I do think it's a discussion it would be nice to have those numbers when we start to look at the different zones where cottage housing is allowed in R2, or cottage housing is allowed in R2, but townhomes are not. And where we are seeing townhomes built in R3 and R4. As we've started to get feedback about some of the Habitat for Humanity cottage housing that is going in, maybe what would be more desirable in some of those established neighborhoods would be a duplex or a three-person or a three-unit townhome, because it allows for a little bit more setback from neighboring existing properties. Shared wall construction's usually a little bit more affordable. And maybe that should be utilized in some of our more lower density zones. It is addressed somewhat in the Housing Action Plan. There's some suggestion of options to include that, but I think that having that number of an example moving forward of how many cottage homes we've been seeing over the last few years and for 2024, and then also being able to kind of see them on a map could be helpful when we start to talk about our comprehensive plan. My other concern, and I know it totally makes sense not to get into individual parcels, because this is kind of a high level trying to figure out this is kind of squishy math. But I do think there's a few areas that concern me. One is when we start to look at our R4 zones, because that's really where we have the most pressure to include multifamily housing when it comes to some of these lower income bands, right? Because they're not looking at single family, they're not looking at kind of higher end stuff. So I go over to, the place that I really take first issue with is at Skyline. Looking at just adjacent to Washington Park, there is an R4 area. Some of that along Skyline Way, I think is what it's called, the main entrance. Yes, those are all apartments, townhomes, things like that. But then you've got west of that, those are, say they're redevelopable, but those are all single-family homes that are selling at market rate that have been consistently improved upon. And so I'm curious how, other than the fact that it does have an R4 zoning, how we are getting to the point where we expect those to be redeveloped. I just don't see that being able to financially purchase enough homes, tear them down, and then build something that's the density that we expect from an R4 that you may see between Commercial and R Avenue. I'm sure the next argument would be that you would go down and look at the reduction factor, but that reduction factor, I believe, is only by 25%. And so that seems like a significant number of those lots would then qualify for redevelopment. When we look at those R4s parcels, do they tie it to like a number of units or anything like that? I know I'm getting in the weeds, but this is kind of the things that I'm like curious about. Huh?
I can't answer your questions now. Can we talk about this, like looking at the map?
Yeah. So I guess then my other question is, do we even? I mean, there's a couple areas like that. Does that really have much of an impact when we're talking about, capacity in the future? And I think this is really just lending itself to, do we have enough capacity or do we need to go into the urban growth area, right? I mean, that's kind of our ultimate question with this. But I think there's a few of those we should have a little bit more of a deep dive in. Some of those higher density areas and how accurate it is.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Mr. Coleman, thank you for the presentation. I wasn't able to attend the Planning Commission meeting, so really appreciate this. And I wanted to agree with Ms. Cleveland McGrath's point about basically council is not able to actually sort of, create, I guess, more affordable housing, but what our job is to do is to create conditions such that, basically the market can have a broader sort of basis of housing. And I think this diagram is actually, if you take this and split it into sort of pre-2019 and post-2019, and if you overlay it with the AMI graph, I think you would see that pre-2019, we really were just hitting that first, or that most expensive part of the AMI graph. Like that's just, and maybe a little like sliver of the sort of 101 to 120%. And I don't know for sure, like I know, we're not hitting the 0 to 30%, 0 to 50% per se with the newer zoning regs, but I think we have expanded the coverage at least where we've, since 2019, significantly, or at least, moved that to the left of that AMI graph where we're hitting more of the 80 to 100%. We're not, maybe even a bit of the 50 to 80. Certainly not covering it all, but hitting pieces of it. And then with partnerships with like the Family Center, we're also starting to eat into the far left as well. Certainly not perfect, but improvement over, say, that, pre-2019 where we're just hitting that sort of far right, 120% and above. So the goal probably is to continue like inching to the left so we're able to accommodate more capacity in that sort of 0 to 80 that we're really not able to accommodate today. Thank you.
All right, who else hasn't weighed in on this one? Again, this is the first blush officially at council on the land capacity analysis. I know there's a lot more, but anything glaring? Okay, all right. Okay, so sure, we'll bring you in. Come on up if you wanted to.
Sarah Holohan, live in Anacortes. I just have a question because this is called a land capacity study, and you're looking at how many housing units you can bring in, and it sounds like, I'm really surprised, but it sounds good that they're, with the current zoning, it's possible to bring in the people, the amount of units that you're expecting for growth. However, we pride ourselves on quality of life here. So is there any looking at future parks or even transportation corridors or all the things that go with more housing and more people? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything to wrap up, Mr. Coleman? I know
That's all I had brought.
Okay. All right, hearing nothing from council and being no further business for the council, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you very much.